госпожа председатель.
Madam President, I would like to thank Gary Peterson and Gada Mudavi and Morgan Evelyn for their briefings. The key importance for the political settlement in Syria is being taken by the increasingly restored links between Damascus and regionals. We welcome the decision made on the 7th of May, the decision made by the Council of Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the League of Arab States in Cairo to restore the participation of the Syrian Arab Republic in the meetings of the Council and in all bodies of the League of Arab States, in particular the participation of the President Assad in the League summit. Take into account the fact that Syria is one of the foundation states of the League. And this is a long-awaited step, and it became a logical outcome of the process of Syria's return to the Arab family. And Russia has always consistently called for exactly that turn of events. We have worked with regional players for a long time, encouraging them to restore full relations with Damascus. The decision passed by the League's Council showed the desire of the countries in the Arab world to strengthen their coordination so as to resolve the urgent regional and international issues, reconfirmed their determination to continue having an independent policy on the basis of their own interests. In this context, we hope that the Arab countries will increase the support to the Syrian Arab Republic as it deals with the issues of post-conflict recovery. Madam President, there's also positive trends in the relations between Syria and Turkey. On the 10th of May in Moscow, there was a quadrilateral meeting of ministers of foreign affairs of Russia, Iran, Syria, and Turkey in the Astana format. In the course of that meeting, the participants confirmed their commitment to sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria, to combating terrorism in all of its forms and manifestations, and underscored the need for a greater international assistance to Damascus, including for the purposes of voluntary, safe, and dignified return of Syrians home and for the post-conflict recovery. Unfortunately, instead of supporting the efforts by the regional actors, which show very clearly that they can on their own resolve the issues within the Arab family, our Western colleagues continue exerting pressure, including by force, on the Syrian authorities and countries in the region, and dissuading them from having dialogue with Damascus. In the context, we would like to yet once again point to the destructive position of the United States. It seems it's not enough for them to pump weapons into the illegal military units in Trans-Euphrates and at Tanf. According to our information, Washington has started creating the Army of Free Syria near Raqqa with the participation of the local Arab tribes, ISIL fighters, and other terrorist organizations. The goal here is clear. It is to use these fighters against the legitimate authorities of Syria so as to destabilize the situation in the country. We are concerned by the intensification of airstrikes by Israel against Syria, including with violation of the airspace of neighboring countries. In April alone, there were about 10 random strikes, and what was destroyed not just civilian infrastructure in Aleppo and Latakia, but also civilians. We condemn such use of force in violation of Syria's sovereignty and the sovereignty of neighboring Arab countries. We deeply regret the fact that there is no reaction whatsoever to this on the part of the UN leadership. At the same time, the arbitrary churning out of special mechanism to investigate incidents and human rights incidents in Syria continues. The next one is a body for looking for the missing. There is no added value to such entities. It's not a consensual decision. It's pushed through by a group of states in General Assembly and HRC. Collecting compromising materials on Syria at the behest of Washington and Brussels with a view to future judicial proceedings only push the political perspective further away. On the political track, we continue supporting the efforts by Geir Pedersen strictly in line with Security Council Resolution 2254 and without any external interference. We think at the same time it's important to make sure that the special envoy keeps strictly within the mandate and facilitates the inter-Syrian dialogue, and the optimal format for that is a constitutional committee. We think at the same time that the personal decision about the parameters for the future rounds of consultations need to be decided by the Syrians themselves. Madam President, we share the worrying assessments which have to do with the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Syria. It worsened after the earthquake in February. 15 million people were in need. There was a fuel and water crisis, outbreaks of cholera, and now there are large-scale destruction and a new wave of internally displaced. And the UN at the same time is catastrophically lacking the means for even basic operations. The annual humanitarian plan for Syria, for the territories under Damascus control, is only financed to 9% in the first 5 months of this year. This is the reason, inter alia, why the World Food Programme will have to reduce in number its beneficiaries by 70%. We would like to address the advocates of the cross-border mechanism, which has outlived its usefulness. You fervently advocate its extension for a year, and your argument is the need for long-term planning for UN humanitarian operations. At the same time, how can humanitarians plan anything on government-controlled territories when there's such drastic underfinancing of the humanitarian plan for Damascus? Your argument is open blackmail, therefore, violating all humanitarian principles and once again showing your double standards. The problem having to do with the Americans' pillaging of the Syrian grain and oil resources didn't go away. There are also the suffocating illegal unilateral measures by the Western Bloc. We call on the UN leadership once again and the new resident coordinator in Syria, Mr. Abdelmouleh, to, without delay, provide a report on the impact of unilateral restrictions on the humanitarian situation in the country, all the more so than his predecessor, during the April IAD on Syria, reconfirmed that this would be done. Madam President, the unprecedented decision by the Syrian government to open for the UN and then extend by 3 months up to the 13th August 2 cross-border crossings with Turkey, Bab al-Salam al-Rai, in addition to the Bab al-Hawa crossing under Resolution 2672, unfortunately was not given due credit. Quite to the contrary, the impression is created that this decision would negate the prospect of organizing humanitarian supplies to the insurgent northwest from Damascus. From July 2021, only 10 convoys reached Idlib through Crossline, and the most recent one in January. In other words, not a single one after the earthquake. The overall number of truckloads was 152. We are very concerned by the fact that this is happening despite the acute humanitarian needs of the people in these regions. There is absolutely no reaction to that from the leadership of the UN either. At the same time, when speaking about the cross-border mechanism, we have heard the Secretary General and his USG talk about the moral imperative which we need to follow and keep the cross-border mechanism. It's a very odd moral imperative. It only applies to the terrorists in Idlib, and it does not apply to the country as a whole. At the same time, from February to April, from Turkey through 3 checkpoints, 1,700 trucks came in. The UN sent more than 100 interagency missions. The emergency humanitarian appeal to the northwest, not under Damascus control, is about 400 million for 5 million people and is now fully funded. The UN mandate, colleague, to use the already mentioned cross-border mechanism expires on the 10th of July this year. We see no reason at all to extend it. The UN has shown that in its contacts and coordination with the national government, they can organize their work without a Security Council resolution, which now must finally cease to exist. Furthermore, the time is now ripe when we need to start dealing with the issue of refugees in a practical plane. And by the way, about the refugees, June of this year will see in Brussels yet another so-called donor conference on Syria. The representatives of Syrian authorities once again are not invited. Actually, the West continues criminally freezing the crisis with Syrian refugees in neighboring countries, dooming people to live in tents even winter. Helping with internal problems, building reserves, restoring at least a basic infrastructure, these are the things that are expected from the donors. Providing for the humanitarian needs of Syria should be based without preconditions on the interests of the Syrian people. I thank you.